Roger Bay's got copies of something, so I'm going to talk about everything and have you ask questions if you like. This is a controversial photo. Everybody's seen this photo, right?
No.
Come closer, Bobby Fitzpatrick, man. One right here.
Okay.
Please. Okay. So this is so important.
Hey, somebody help them elders with them chairs, please. Don't know.
Does anybody know where this photo was taken at?
31
What location?
3140 Indiana.
Nope.
Where was it taken at, Carter Bay?
At the prophet's office.
That's about 3603.
Who said 3603?
Right here, Crenshaw Hill.
Who said 3140? Who said the prophet's office? The ones who said 3140 is right. The ones who said the prophet's office is right. The prophet's office is what address? 3140 Indiana. So when you walk in 3140 Indiana, the first office to your left was his office. The office to your left ahead going towards the main gallery area was somebody else's office, probably Claude Green. But the office to your right coming in was Oscar DePriest's office. And many of you who did the tour in there before Illinois Institute of Technology took over the building, which who has it now, was Oscar DePriest's safe that was not open. We toured that building many times. As you all know, we tried to get that building. We didn't have enough support, and with the advice of one of our real estate officers, Carter Bay, and a few more, it would take an enormous amount of money to rehab the whole thing that we didn't have, because there were 3 floors, 10 rooms on each floor, and each room had their own fireplace. 3140 Indiana was first built in the 1800s, and it was a playhouse for the Jews. Indiana, for those who don't live in Chicago, Indiana is right next to what street?
Michigan.
Michigan. Michigan, right?
That's right.
Michigan is one way going south, and Indiana is one way going north. It used to be 2 ways. Michigan, the next street over, was known as Car Automobile Row, R-O-W. Because when the automobiles became more popular in the 30s, like the T-Model Ford and on Ford, most of them, if you wanted one in Chicago, that's where you went. Michigan Avenue from, let's say, 35th in Michigan all the way down to Cermak was filled with car dealers. Today, only one car dealership is on Michigan Avenue, right across from the Daily Defender building, the newspaper building. And the reason for that is because the Daily Defender newspaper building, first 3140 didn't have a swimming pool, but the Daily Defender, that was a Jewish playhouse before it was Daily Defender, they built a swimming pool there, and that was their playhouse as well. Give you a little more history on 3140. 3140 Indiana was owned by who?
Julius Rosenwald.
Nope. Who took over Macy's store? What was Macy's store called first?
Riches.
Marshall Field.
Marshall Field. 3140 Indiana was owned by Marshall Field. Marshall Field was best friends with who?
Julius Rosenwald.
Julius Rosenwald. They were multi-billionaires. In case you don't know who Julius Rosenwald was, he was the president of Sears Roebuck. He bought them out and became one of the largest retailers in the world. And what he did was he revolutionized buying from the catalog. And there had been catalogs set up by Montgomery Ward and other people, but never like Julius Rosenwald did Sears. He upped the ante, which means that you could buy a house from Sears, right? And they would send you all the materials, the plywood, whatever you need, the whole architectural structure. Julius Rosenwald employed who?
Claude Green Bay.
Claude Green Bay. He was his personal butler. All right? Here he comes now, the Reiki master.
Uh-oh. Matthew
So
Bay
we're
called
gonna
him the
talk
Ricky
for about
Master.
10 more minutes. When you start talking about one piece of Moorish American history, it goes so many ways. It goes here and there and there and there, but it helps you to connect the dots. 3140 Indiana eventually was taken over and given to Oscar DePriest, who was our first Asiatic congressman since the Civil War, right? Oscar DePriest changed the building to the People's Movement, the People's Building. And it became a center for galvanizing political power in Chicago. Which means that in 1919, for instance, one of the biggest and the most deadliest riots occurred in Chicago. And it was because Lake Michigan over here was divided, and there was an imaginary line of division for Asiatics and Europeans near 31st Street, north of here. One day, Asiatic went over the imaginary line where the Europeans bathed and swam at, and they beat him. And then it became an all-out so-called race war. Well, the one who, and when it became like that, there was the stockyard, which was the major employer for not only our people, but Irish immigrants as well.
Right.
And in order to get to the stockyards, this was before they built the Dan Ryan Expressway,
Right.
you'd have to come this way east. The Asiatics couldn't go to work and make money to feed their families. In case y'all don't know what the stockyard is, it's where they butchered all the cattle that came from the south on the trains. Chicago has the most intricate railroad system in the nation. You can go to somebody's backyard and there's some train tracks. I mean, they're everywhere. That was to carry the heavy meat from the cattle coming here to be slaughtered. And 99.9% of the cattle and the pigs that were slaughtered was in the stockyard. So, Lewis B. Anderson, who was the alderman of the Second Ward, and which is north of here, was able to quell the violence and get everybody to sit down and talk, and they were able to go to work. But before then, they were killing each other, knocking each other in the head. They couldn't be caught. When I say they, the Europeans couldn't be caught on our side. We couldn't be caught on their side. And if you go to ChicagoDailyDefender.com historical library, you can probably pull up some photos of what was going on in that riot, because it got so bad, like I said earlier, they called in the state troopers. When Marshall Field sold this building, incidentally, Marshall Field was like the person that Julius Rosenwald used to do his thing. He had so much money, he put up the money to build and to stock what is now called the Field Museum of Science and Industry and the Field Museum of Natural History. Julius Rosenwald traveled the world obtaining artifacts, and he named those institutions after his friend Marshall Field. But he was the one who initially did that. Julius Rosenwald discussion is probably an hour or two, so we're going to move as fast as much as we can. Anyway, Julius Rosenwald, have anybody ever read Saul Alinsky's work, his social work? Okay, look up that author, Saul, S-A-U-L, Alinsky. He wrote a book about how to control grassroots organizations, okay? And this is the tactics that Julius Rosenwald was using, and our people called him the Jewish philanthropist. He financed most of your major institutions, especially in Georgia. Morehouse, Spelman. He gave the money to them, not because he was a philanthropist, but because he wanted to control the curriculum and what was taught to them. Islam?
Actually, even Tuskegee,
Even Tuskegee. Thank you, brother.
the college that Claude Green Bay came from.
Thank you, brother. And when you get into Claude Green Bay, his whole family were heavily involved in politics or in big positions, so to speak. The first president of Providence Hospital was his brother. The first district judge during that time was his other brother. They even named the school after Mr. Green, I can't think of it, Wendell Green. his name. When they turned the building over, 3140, to this building right here, to the people, a church quickly commandant the auditorium area. The prophet had been meeting somewhere else. Where was it, Roger Bay? Somebody's basement? Yeah. Somebody's basement. And the prophet would be downstairs and the church people would be upstairs and they would be getting happy, making noise, speaking in tongues, and it disturbed the Moors. And the prophet says, one day we're going to be upstairs. And they were. One day. Julius Rosenwald wanted to take charge of the situation because Julius Rosenwald and all of the multi-billionaires at that time, they knew who Drew Ali was. They knew, even if our people didn't know, they had their astrologers or whatever they call them to see, who know who he was. They knew his divine power, they knew. So what they wanted to do, if they couldn't beat him, they wanted to control him and control everything he did. So that's why they put him in the basement. Claude Green Bay managed 3140 business. 3140 Indiana. Claude Green Bay was the president of what club?
Chicago Civic Boosters Club.
Chicago Civic Boosters, which was so-called elite club that all the Asiatics that had money could belong to. And they couldn't really go nowhere but down south and back, you know. But they would travel in comfort for that time. Claude Green Bay